Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, the United States and its allies have begun airstrikes against Islamic State targets in Syria as the coalition expands its campaign against the militant group. President Park Geun-hye and Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper signed a free trade deal for their nations, agreeing to upgrade their ties to a strategic partnership. Plus, North Korea says it wants to take part in the high-level talks on its human rights that'll be held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Tuesday, September 23rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. We begin with news that the United States has unleashed massive airstrikes on Islamic State positions in Syria, marking a significant escalation in the fight against the extremists, which had, up until now at least, enjoyed safe haven in that country.
And for the latest, let's connect live to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by. Eunice, what do we know right now?
Well, Jin-joo, we received word of U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria just about an hour ago, and as far as we know, they are continuing as dawn breaks in that country. Pentagon Press Secretary Rear Admiral John Kirby confirmed the military operation, saying that the commander-in-chief, that's U.S. President Barack Obama, had approved the air campaign early Monday local time. He said a mix of fighter jets, bombers, and Tomahawk missiles were being fired from ships in the region, saying more details would come later. CNN is reporting that the U.S. is being joined by forces from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan, among other possible Arab nations. This, of course, a part of President Obama's mission to disrupt and destroy the Islamic State declared some 2 weeks ago. Now, earlier today, a leader of Syria's main opposition group, Hadi Barra, from the United Nations, had called for immediate U.S. airstrikes to, in his words, avert catastrophe. Nonetheless, surprise for what is shaping up to be an intense several hours of aerial warfare in Syria.
All right, Eunice, thank you for the update. We'll see you later in the newscast for the rest of our global news headlines. And now we move on to President Park Geun-hye's visit to Canada. After nearly a decade of negotiations, Korea has signed a free trade agreement with Canada, which will be a huge deal for both sides.
Massive deal, yes, and that's because it is Canada's first such deal in the Asia-Pacific region, and it's going to give Korean companies much better access to the very lucrative North American market. Chae-sun has the details.
9 years after launching trade negotiations, Korea and Canada signed their free trade agreement on Monday.
FTA 효과가 교역, 투자 분야를 넘어 기술 협력, 인적 교류, 민간 경제 협력 등 제반 분야로 파급이 돼서 양국의 경제 협력이 한 단계 도약할 수 있도록.
With the FTA signing, President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Stephen Harper elevated their relations to a strategic partnership, placing a greater emphasis on their political and economic cooperation and mutual trust. Seoul and Ottawa set global peace and co-prosperity as their shared goals. The two partnering nations sealed a number of other deals to increase cross-sharing of advanced technologies. For instance, Korea will offer up its know-how in IT-based new energy industries, such as the smart grid and energy storage systems, in return for Canada's shale gas and oil sands exploration and development technologies.
We pushed for a memorandum of understanding to expand from cooperation in our strong clean energy technology to that of Canada's oil technology.
President Park and Prime Minister Harper will also expand their working holiday program to encourage more people-to-people exchanges. The Korean president also secured Ottawa's support for her North Korea policies. President Park is now in New York to carry out multilateral diplomacy at the United Nations. At Tuesday's UN Climate Summit, she will speak about building a growth engine out of the global problem by converging IT with culture and other sectors in a creative economy. Chae Arirang News, New York.
Now, North Korea says it wants to join high-level talks on the regime's human rights abuses in a meeting set to be held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The meeting, chaired by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, comes at a time of heightened international scrutiny of Pyongyang's dire human rights record. Kim Min-ji has more.
A high-level meeting discussing North Korea's human rights violations will be held on Tuesday local time on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The meeting, which will be presided by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, will be attended by South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se as well as diplomats from the European Union and Japan. The dire human rights situation in Pyongyang has come under greater international attention this year following the release of a report by the UN Commission of Inquiry that accuses North Korea's leaders of widespread, systematic and gross human rights violations. Kerry is expected to condemn North Korea's human rights abuses, focusing on its political prison camps, and he will also likely bring up the issue of the 3 Americans detained in the north. The meeting is aimed at garnering support for a UN resolution on the issue. Pyongyang is also asked to attend the meeting. The North Korean ambassador to the UN, Cha Sung-nam, said the North was waiting for an answer.
We told the U.S. that we will attend the talks. If the meeting is focused on North Korean issues, we should attend. We are waiting for an answer from Washington. If they really want to solve this issue through dialogue, we see no reason why they would turn us down.
However, the ambassador struck a more negative tone in regards to a potential meeting between the foreign ministers of the 2 Koreas on the sidelines of the UN gathering. He said talks should be held in Korea and not in a foreign country or international organization, as they are from the same country. North Korea sent its foreign minister Lee Soo-young and vice foreign minister to New York. Lee will address the General Assembly later this week. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly is set to meet later this week for the second time this year. The Legislative Assembly will be convened on Thursday, and attention is on whether new reform measures will be introduced. This as the regime has been reportedly introducing new economic policies that give more incentives to the working class. Also being watched is whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will attend the assembly meeting. Kim has not been seen at official events for about 3 weeks now, fueling speculation about possible health problems. He has been on hand for all 4 Supreme People's Assembly meetings since taking power in late 2011. Now, North Korean exporters are depending less on raw materials and more on textiles. New data from the Korea International Trade Association office in Beijing shows that exports of North Korean textiles to China are expected to reach $800 million by the end of the year, which would represent a 4-fold increase from 2010. The association says the growth is due to the North's cheap labor and that some Chinese companies have begun sending materials to North Korea to be made into finished products. Exports of raw materials, meanwhile, slipped to just under 61% of total exports in the January to July period, down more than 10 percentage points from 2011.
Now, the reviews were mixed when Apple unveiled its new iPhone 6 series around 2 weeks ago, but consumers have been decidedly less mixed on the prospects of owning these new gadgets. The smartphones went on sale this past weekend and they have smashed record highs. Our Kwani Kim reports.
Apple enthusiasts cheer in delight as they rush into an Apple store in New York to be the first to get their hands on the newly launched iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. One Apple fan holds up his prized new iPhone after camping out since early in the morning.
Big hands need a big phone. That's it, you know? No, actually, the better camera, longer battery life.
I'm most excited about the Apple Pay, be able to pay without having to take out my wallet.
Apple says it has smashed its sales record for an opening weekend of a new iPhone model, delivering 10 million iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus in the first 3 days of sale. This tally beats the previous record set last year when Apple sold 9 million iPhone 5C and 5S. The record streak is expected to take another huge leap forward when the new iPhones hit the Chinese market, Apple's most lucrative market.
The U.S. tech giant's new handsets are reportedly being sold at up to 3 times the retail price in Beijing's black markets. The battle between Apple and Samsung will reach boiling point next week when the Korean firm rolls out its Galaxy Note 4 in Korea and the U.S. Meanwhile, local brokerage firms are slashing Samsung Electronics' third-quarter profit earnings, citing the firm's slowing smartphone business. Samsung Securities says it expects Samsung Electronics to post a third-quarter operating profit of $4.5 billion, down $1 billion from a projection made early this month. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Korean automakers Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors are doing pretty well in China, with their combined market share in the world's second biggest economy expected to reach a 9-year high this year. Industry sources say Hyundai and Kia sold over 1.1 million cars during the first 8 months of this year, with the combined market share standing at 10.6%. That figure is the highest since 2005, when they accounted for 11% of the Chinese market. With the automakers' newly released models, analysts forecast they'll surpass that mark this year. However, others are less optimistic, saying it remains to be seen whether Hyundai and Kia will maintain a 10% plus market share, since the Korean automakers did not win approval from the Chinese government on their plan to establish 4 manufacturing plants in the country.
And the sporting extravaganza that is the Incheon Asian Games is now into day 4, and the action is heating up by the minute.
Certainly is, and few would argue that baseball, probably the most popular sport here in Korea, is grabbing most of the headlines, as you'd expect, especially after Team Korea grabbed the gold in such dramatic and enjoyable fashion in Guangzhou 4 years ago.
Right, the team's head coach has vowed to win all 5 games, including the final, to retain their Asian Championship crown, and they got off to the best possible start last night with a crushing victory against Thailand.
Yes, and our very own Song Ji-sun joins us now in the studio for more. Thank you for coming in, Ji-sun. So the Thai team were put out of their misery after 5 innings.
Right, it seemed like Thailand was no match for the Korean team, packed with a lot of stars from the KBO. The Korean team wrapped up their first preliminary with a cold game finish, beating over Thailand. Now it was SK's Kim Kwang-hyun, who are actually based in Incheon, who was starting off, and he got all the run support he needed in the first inning as they scored 8 runs. It was also a big night for NC Dino slugger Na Sung-bum, who went 3 for 4 with 3 RBI and 2 runs scored, as Thailand manages 2 hits in the whole game. Korea won 15-0, or 0 as the game is called after 5 innings of play. Team Korea's next game is against Taiwan on Wednesday, a much better team than Thailand, so it'll be a tougher test, but one they think they can win.
Well, 15-0 is some score, whatever sport you play. But it does seem as though, looking at those pictures, the Thailand team had a lot of fun, and at least they learned something from playing such a good team like Korea.
Right, at least they were all smiles after the game. Now, another event, South Korean swimmer Park Tae-won, also known as Marine Boy here in Korea, got off to a rather disappointing start over the weekend.
That's right, that put a lot of fans down, including himself. He actually finished 3rd in his first event of this year's Asian Games in the 200-meter freestyle on Sunday. Now, it wasn't his longtime rival, Chinese swimmer Sun Yang, that won the gold, but rather a young up-and-coming competitor from Japan, 20-year-old Kosuke Hagino, who won. Sun said he didn't see it coming as he was too focused on Park, while Park said he felt bad he could not live up to the heavy expectations on him here at home. He still has some time to turn things around, though. Just about an hour ago, Park qualified for the 400-meter final, which will take place in this evening in a venue that's named after him. He came home with 3 gold medals each in the previous 2 Asian Games, 2 of each from the 200 and the 400-meter races.
Well, good luck to Park Tae-won tonight. Let's hope he brings home the gold. And South Korea is having a pretty good Asian Games. I think we all agree on that. But
it's
not only
just the South, right?
Yeah.
North Korea is also doing really well, despite the lack of their cheering squad.
Right, it's always a big interest for people here as well as around the world, as we also had another inter-Korean showdown in women's under 78 kilograms judo match. Now, it was South Korea's Chung Young-mi who defended her gold title from North Korea's Seoul Kyung, as she earned less penalties than Seoul when the two failed to score a decisive technique. Chung became the first South Korean judoka to win 2 consecutive golds at the Asian Games, and another win against North Korean who she befriended in multiple international matches even before Incheon. Although North Korean lost this match, the North has been performing well in Incheon and are currently in 5th place with 10 medals overall. Their goal is to finish in the top 10, so it looks like they have a great chance so far. They've also been impressing the world in just 3 days, setting 4 new world records during this Asian Games, all in weightlifting.
4 world records in weightlifting. That's amazing. Congratulations to them.
Yes, and we hope to see some South Korean athletes smash some world records during these games. Thanks ever so much for the updates, Ji-sun.
Thank you.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo with Pro.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, and Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about.
In line with its push to raise the nation's cigarette prices by 80% next year, the Korean government also unveiled a set of plans to inject tens of millions of dollars into public anti-smoking campaigns. Park Ji-won reports.
Lee Jae-wook is one of many in the country who've decided to quit smoking before the cigarette price hike takes effect. He's used every method he knows to try and kick the habit, including gargling solutions and physical exercise.
I feel an urge to smoke again when I'm stressed out, or when I see people around me smoking.
Doctors say nicotine withdrawal symptoms are much more short-lived than most think, lasting only a few days, although it varies person to person.
Intense nicotine withdrawal symptoms generally last around 7 to 10 days, so it's important to endure and get through those first 10 days.
But that's easier said than done. To encourage smoking cessation and nip the addicted habit in the bud altogether, the Korean government has expanded its anti-smoking campaign budget for next year to $145 million US. That's more than 13 times the $11 million allocated for 2014. About 35% of the budget will pay for anti-smoking programs targeting teens.
Currently, 25% of male high school seniors smoke. We will focus on anti-smoking campaigns for adolescents as they represent the future of the nation's health.
To tackle the problem of young smokers, the government says it will implement anti-smoking education from elementary to high schools and teen counseling support centers nationwide. To stem the country's tobacco epidemic, the government plans to work with health and community centers to offer diverse anti-smoking services, even setting up special support programs to help all active soldiers. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, the Asian Games in Incheon has been a major draw for tourists from all over Asia to Korea, but there are plenty of other reasons to come to Korea, especially at this time of the year. The 2014 Autumn Tourism Week gets started later this week as it happens, and there are some amazing discounts on offer on tourism-related things. Gwon-soo reports.
Most Koreans go on vacation during the summer, but the beautiful colors of autumn and perfect weather these days call for taking some days off and traveling around the country. And now may be the best time to plan a trip as the so-called 2014 Autumn Tourism Week kicks off at the end of this week. The campaign, introduced by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Korea Tourism Organization, runs from September 25th to October 5th. More than 3,700 tourism-related businesses are participating, offering lots of events and discounts that should lessen the financial burden on domestic travelers. They range from cheaper transportation and accommodation fees to food and event price cuts. Korea's state-run railway operator Korail and the nation's biggest express bus operator Kumo Bus Lines are offering discounts of up to 30% on tickets. Price reductions on gasoline at major tourist locations, for rental cars and room rates at 180 hotels will be slashed too. Not only that, Korea's ancient palaces and amusement parks can be enjoyed at discount prices.
We want to promote discounts at main tourism businesses to encourage people to take trips. We are taking into consideration people's time and financial restrictions, and we hope to boost the economy.
The 2014 Spring Tourism Week was launched earlier this year, but the project fell flat largely due to April's ferry disaster that made people feel less inclined to travel. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Hello, again, I'm Eunice Kim with the rest of your global headlines. A 3-day nationwide lockdown in Sierra Leone was lifted late Sunday as authorities there declared the measure to control the Ebola outbreak a success. They said staff visited more than 1 million households to survey for bodies and educate residents about the highly contagious hemorrhagic virus, registering also 130 new cases of Ebola infections. The WHO said on Monday more than 2,800 people have died of the disease in West Africa, but that the situations in Nigeria and Senegal were largely contained. The United Nations has said it would cost about $1 billion to contain the virus now, but less than half of that has been raised. Massive protests clogged parts of New York City's financial district Monday as more than 1,000 protesters blocked streets and stopped traffic, denouncing what they called Wall Street's contribution to climate change. Dubbed Flood Wall Street, the demonstrations extended Sunday's march that had brought out more than 300,000 people into Manhattan to protest climate change, triple the last largest protest on record in Copenhagen 5 years ago. More than 100 people were arrested as protesters stopped traffic near the New York Stock Exchange. And we are still about 8 years away from the 2022 World Cup games, but host city Qatar is seeing no shortage of controversy ahead of it. UK daily The Guardian reports that official figures showed nearly 1,000 migrant workers from Nepal and India have died while preparing for the games. That's a rate of more than one person a day. A high proportion of those deaths were triggered by workplace accidents or sudden heart failure. This as a FIFA executive committee member said the games cannot happen in Qatar, explaining that medics refuse to take responsibility for the region's searing heat. Qatar has maintained it would successfully host the 2022 World Cup Games.
Good afternoon. The 16th typhoon of the season, Fung Wang, is still moving northward, but it's expected to dissipate before reaching to Korea, but will still have an indirect effect on us here. The southern areas of the nation will begin to see rain starting this afternoon, and tomorrow the entire nation will get torrential rain. So for today, depending on where you are, the daily highs and weather conditions during the day could be quite different. We are having a sunny day here in Seoul, and we're likely to have a sunny day for throughout the day with a high of 28, while Gwangju and Busan should see a mix of showers and clouds from early this afternoon. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island will be getting heavy showers throughout the day, and people in Daejeon will notice increasing clouds and receive rain in the early afternoon. Now the weather in Incheon, where the Asian Games are taking place, should be nice today, but the heavy rain will have an effect tomorrow, so some of the games that are taking place outdoors might be cancelled. But by Thursday, the weather will come again. Now that's all I have for you today, and let's send it back to Mark and Jin-joo in the studio.
Well, thank you, Jian, for the weather update, and that does it for now. Mark and I'll be back at the same time on Wednesday.
Yes, we do hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for watching.